Hey guys, today we're absolutely nerding out. We're gonna be talking about just the basics of delivering videos. You know, that scary export page with a bunch of different settings. We're gonna try to shine some light on it today. And we're mostly gonna be looking at diagrams. This is pretty universal and it should be pretty easy applying this to any editing software you're using. Okay, so let's start with the basics. Your video file is a combination of many different things. Let's talk about the codecs. There's a couple of codecs you should be aware of. First of all, you got the H.264 codec. It is not a lossless codec and it is bounded by compression. If you're going to be sending a video file to, your family, friends, and to your grandma, like you probably want to send your grandma a H.264 a file with a H.264 codec. Your grandma's gonna appreciate it. Next of all, you got the ProRes and you got a few flavors of the DNX flavor. Those are Pro codecs with a specific thing that they're meant for. So they can be lossless, and they also use this special compression type, which makes them more efficient to play on your PC. So if you're editing, for example, a 4K file that is compressed might be very difficult to play on your PC. But a 4K file with a ProRes codec or a DNX codec might play very easily and not require a lot of resources. So they're very good for editing, they're very good for proxies, they're just good for that. A lot of people usually overcomplicate this process, but it's it's not too difficult. Select your container. MP4 is widely accepted everywhere, and when we come to the guidelines set up by different streaming platforms, a lot of them actually recommend MP4. It just makes it easier for them. You would use a H.264 codec, and you would compress it. So now you might be thinking, okay, so how much should I compress my file? This is where we come to the guidelines set up by different streaming platforms. For example, YouTube, for a 1080p video at 24, 25, or 30 frames a second, recommends a bitrate of 8 megabytes per second. Vimeo, Facebook, Twitter. As you can see, Vimeo supports and also recommends lossless codecs, which makes it a better platform if you're uploading a file which you don't want it to suffer any rough compression due to their encoder. Let's say you exported a video, you're following their guidelines, and you upload to YouTube, and then you compare it on YouTube to the file on your PC, and you see that the file on PC is higher quality than the one on YouTube. And you might be thinking, oh, why is that? Well, that's because online streaming platforms take your video file and run it through another encoder. They do this so it's more efficient for them to store your video in a format that is more appropriate for streaming. They also need to create different brackets of your video. So on YouTube, for example, when you select a 1080p quality or 720p, that is a different version of the video that YouTube has encoded. In the future, I'll be making a video on how to maximize your quality with certain platforms, YouTube in particular. YouTube actually has a few different encoders that they use depending on a few factors. It is speculated that one of them is popularity. Another one is the resolution of your video. By using some tricks, you can actually squeeze in a higher quality version of your video to YouTube and, enjoy a better video. Now, there's a couple of fun things I wanted to mention. What is a good bitrate for your video? So a good bitrate for your video is as low as possible without a noticeable loss in quality, right? So how we measure video quality has actually changed a lot throughout the years, and there are a couple different methods. Netflix actually does a really great job and has developed an open source software called VMAF, which is the Video Multi-Method Assessment Fusion. And it is open source, which means it is free. And they run a lot of tests on their videos to make sure that they are of appropriate quality, but also as low bitrate as possible, so that they are easier to stream for their customers. Okay, now let's get a little more nerdy. This is from a Netflix tech blog article. As you can see, your bitrate for certain resolutions kind of caps out at a certain point, and increasing the bitrate further will not increase the quality of your video, right? And you want to hit a nice sweet spot, somewhere around here. Some videos require a higher bitrate to score higher on the VMAF test, and some videos actually do not require a high bitrate to score highly. Things that are more complicated and require more bitrate are things like motion blur, uneven areas, or grain. So, for example, BoJack Horseman on Netflix at 1080p is only compressed with 1.5 megabytes a second, and it looks great, right? And this is Orange is the New Black, I believe, at 1080p, and they use 4.6 megabytes a second. Now, as you can see, this is much lower than YouTube's bitrates and other platforms, but they get much higher quality. Now you might be thinking, oh, why? Interesting. This is because they use much more advanced encoders. As you can see in this table here, the VMAF score at 250 kilobytes a second using different encoders gives widely different scores. The VP9 encoder is actually the same one that YouTube uses for the higher tier of videos, and an AV1 is the one it uses for the lower tier videos. Now, those are the basics of what matters when exporting a video, and why your video might not look great on a streaming platform. I'll attach a couple of extra files and references under this video if you'd like to do some further reading, but those are pretty much the basics of what matters when you're delivering your video. Just choosing an appropriate codec, choosing an appropriate container, and then choosing an appropriate bitrate, and that's pretty much it. There's no big magic to it. A lot of people overcomplicate it, but it doesn't need to be that complicated. That's it. I'll see you next one, guys.